The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
Hello.
Man, is there a delay? Because, that was almost like, 3-4 seconds.
There may be. Should I switch to my break or
no?
Or what?
I think you're okay. I think you're okay. It's just, we're not on a sat phone or anything else in the middle of the, Indian Ocean or what have you. So, how you
might
doing?
As well be.
That's
good.
That's true. Yeah. So we recorded this on the 23rd of May, which, for those of you trying to follow us on the show, last week was our second episode with Joe Gray, which I hope you enjoyed on OSINT and collection and, managing the heartbeat of, your OSINT collection and, making sure that, you're doing your due diligence for your organizations. I always enjoy when Joe comes on because I learn so much about various types of ways of collecting data. I think it's very important for organizations to maybe do that on a semi-regular basis and make sure that their heartbeat isn't one that's leaking information.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course, a couple of weeks ago, we had lawyer Liz on who was talking about some of the executive order stuff with President Biden and that op-ed piece, which was quite, oh man, there's still a lot going on there. We're going to talk about that next week at our CSEC East meetup, the fallout from that. I found that op-ed piece quite interesting. So,
is his Twitter feed still, or his Twitter account still down?
It might be as of the 23rd, it was still not available. So if anybody's out looking for Alan Gwynn's Twitter, I think he might still be on LinkedIn, but please don't send him hate mail, even though, he has opinions and that's what op-ed means. So, try not to think of him too harshly. I'm sure there's other people have had as bad takes and have survived this as well. So I think he just, he has his opinion and that's what it is, unfortunately. So,
well, I like taking the other side of issues. I like to be a contrarian. I like to be confrontational just for confrontation's sake sometimes.
The devil's advocate thing.
At first,
works.
I thought he was doing it on purpose, but maybe he actually believes that and he teaches that too. So that would be interesting if he did teach it to MBAs and stuff. So
yeah, I hope not.
It's unfortunate that college students are very very much influenced by their professors, I think.
Yeah.
I know they're supposed to be, very mature, but it's pretty easy to influence people, especially when they're young like that.
Right. Yeah. And it's your only data point, being new in the InfoSec or computer science industry. And, these people have a what do they call that? A position of trust or respect. So, because they have the moniker professor. So their thoughts and language and opinions hold weight, especially for the younger folks. So hopefully those folks will get out into the real world and see what security is about. And, maybe they're already on Twitter and other places that they can get other opinions from. So, yeah. So, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, all right. Well, we've bantered, I think, back and forth enough. Maybe our guest this week also will have some information. Sorry. One last bit of laundry. Ms. Berlin is out doing family things, so she's not here this week. We just haven't been ignoring her. She just isn't here right now. So, she will be back hopefully for the next show. So, Melissa, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Before we get started, I realized you might have had some opinions on the op-ed piece from the Hill. What was your thoughts on that? Did you have a chance to read that?
I did actually. That was one of those things that you read it, and I think I had the same opinion of, is this guy trolling? No, this is actually published, and I think it's almost harmful to the industry, right? Because all it takes is one C-level to read that, assume it's a position of authority, and it goes, see, this is all the stuff I've been saying. We don't need to waste money on security. So I kind of wish that and I haven't looked, but I kind of hope that the Hill would maybe redact that op-ed or put a disclaimer or something, because we had a lot of factually wrong information that was being presented as professional advice.
Right. Yeah. The one thing that got me at the end was like, InfoSec is going to experience a renaissance, but he didn't actually go into what a renaissance was or what he's expecting to get from that. So that's some of the things we're going to talk about at our CSEC East meetup. The post author the post speaker discussion that we normally have now is like, what is that renaissance if he says that there's a renaissance coming, and what does that look like if we decided to drop best practices and go back to what life was like before best practices exist, which I don't think that is actually ever a thing. I mean, everything has had best practices. Even, accounting firms in the 1960s had best practices on how to, math, or, how to math all the things, or, power plant operators, had best practices for how to do things. It's part of the process. A process is an established best practice.
Up, right?
Right. Yeah. Don't blow shit up. That's your goal, is to, try not to blow shit up. So,
but I don't think any of us
I
would
never
ever
thought about. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Must be some delay here. I never thought about the CEO aspect of it. So that's a great point, Melissa.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I think we as an industry can recognize we may not get it perfect all the time, but we are always in a state of iterating change and iterating new best practices. That's why at any given moment, they're the best. So to completely abandon all the progress we've made and the lessons we've learned and say, let's go back to the glory days of like the early 90s where we didn't talk about security is pretty irresponsible.
Right. Yeah. So let's, speaking of, implementing new best practices and technology, Melissa is here to talk to us about ZeroTrust. But before we do that, I'd like to have her give you some background on who she is and where she came from. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and, how you came to be, in InfoSec, that would be great.
Sure thing. So yeah, Melissa, some of you may know me as Security Sphynx on Twitter or Discord or various Slacks all around the interwebs. I got my start in IT several years ago, working in the casino gaming industry, which was a blast, except for the grave shift hours. Didn't love that as much. Moved from there into oil and gas, doing sort of like general admin work, and kind of got my feet wet with a little bit of everything, and was promoted into a security dedicated function there. And now I work for a software vendor that focuses on endpoint management and security, and I'm getting my master's at SANS.
Very cool. So wait, so you said you got your start in casino security.
Casino IT.
Casino IT. Okay. You should meet my friend Name Too Long on Twitter. He's a regular attendee of our CSEC East meetups, but he was working at a casino in Eastern Washington doing IT and IT security. You two probably could compare notes and have some horror stories, because he told me a few things about, like being able to only work with, Native American companies to be able to bring technology in and whatever. And yeah, I bet you two could compare some notes and have some real instruction. So
it is, there's a lot of money and there's a lot of regulation flowing through that industry, and there's a lot of very niche applications, and that's always the danger, right? Especially with security, if you've got one provider, what's putting the pressure on them to continually iterate improvements in their product when they're the only shop in town? So
right,
yeah, not competition.
That's right. Yeah. So, so for those of you who've listened to the podcast for a long time, last year, about October timeframe, just September, October timeframe, we did a series of podcasts with a company on ZeroTrust discussion. And when I finished with those, I actually was left with, I don't say more questions than were answered, but I mean there was definitely a lot of whys and hows that I felt like it kind of got glossed over. I don't know if it was because I didn't ask the right questions, or there were some things missing in my understanding of this, and I just didn't know to ask those questions. And obviously they were there because they paid their time and wanted to put the best foot forward, talking about Forrester waves and Gartner quadrants and stuff, which their companies, that's what they do. So what we wanted to do, and Melissa was kind enough to reach out to us about ZeroTrust related items, was and again, this falls in line with some of the stuff we talked about with lawyer Liz on the executive order from President Biden within 90 days to talk about finding a plan, to talk about implementing something. It got really oniony layery there, but the idea was to implement a zero trust architecture within a certain number of days, or have a plan to implement zero trust architecture in the U.S. government in a certain amount of days. And I don't know how this just fit the way it did, but it was perfect. So we're going to talk today. If you're an organization, maybe a government entity that is now having to implement zero trust because of this executive order, you might want to start taking some notes. So Melissa, maybe you could start off by giving us your definition of what zero trust means.
Yeah, so I think that zero trust you could really sum down to security thinking about the who, what, where, when, why, and how of data access and data flow. We as an industry, especially with COVID-19 and this mass work from home exodus, we've had to redefine network trust, and that whole hard outside, soft inside thing that is becoming more present than ever a problem. So knowing who your users are, knowing where and when they are accessing data, and if that's normal, knowing what equipment they're using, be it their personal device, their mobile device, a company issued device, and what the health of that endpoint is, and knowing whether or not those security controls make sense, and that the business units understand who is accessing what data. So I think from a really, really high level view, it is IT Hygiene 101 implemented as security.
Okay. So as the IT guy or something, I'm hearing, great, this is going to solve all of our problems. We don't have to buy any more laptops and give those to people. We can just let them use their, gaming laptops or their Chromebooks to do stuff. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that's what people want to hear. And I think sometimes that's where IT managers and IT leadership come in with the thought that, hey, if we just go zero trust and take everything to the cloud, we can stop worrying about the endpoint. And it's not quite that simple, but Google, with their framework for Beyond Corp, they sort of laid out the concept of you should be able to access anything and do your job from anywhere without having to hit the VPN, like without having to physically log in to a company tunnel. And I think that really needs to be more the focus, less about gaming on your laptop and logging into your work email at the same time. Phishing and those kind of things are still going to happen, so maybe do some separation there. But being able to provide that flexibility for people to work on the road, on vacation, in a Starbucks, and still feel that your data is protected.
Okay. And you consider hostile networks to be like the airport Wi-Fi or Starbucks or whatever. So a VPN doesn't solve that problem being on the hostile network. I just VPN in, I hit up the full tunnel and everything's good, right? All of my traffic is sent through the tunnel and I'm safe, right? What's the issue here? I mean, why do I need zero trust if we have a full tunnel VPN kind of connection?
For one, the cost of maintenance and being able to support a tunnel with the pipe that you need to support your entire workforce is, over the long term, prohibitively expensive, as well as taking up valuable resources. You've got hardware involved. But beyond that, assuming that just because that one tunnel of traffic or even a full tunnel of traffic is secure doesn't mean that there aren't other attack vectors where once something is on the endpoint itself, the secure tunnel of traffic assumes that anything coming from that endpoint you trust. Well, in a zero trust environment, you don't necessarily have that assumption anymore. And so if someone plugs in an infected USB, or if someone downloads a malicious document, yes, it's got access to that tunnel, but you're still going to have other authentication barriers and other ACL controls in place.
Okay. So you've been very kind by putting notes into our doc. I was doing some information searching myself on ZeroTrust. So one of the questions that is in here, what I've heard is there's Beyond Corp. There's several companies that also create their own implementation of these things, and there are open source type versions of these things through like OAuth proxies and what have you. But is there an optimal or easy way of implementing zero trust that is also secure? I think that's the bigger question. It's like, yes, we can make zero trust easy to implement, but is it a secure implementation?
So I think that the very short answer to that is it depends. And the slightly longer answer to that is that you don't know what the best fit of cost versus capability versus your ability to execute, which I think is something that people forget. You can buy the greatest solution on the market. You can even get the freest greatest solution on the market. But if you don't have the ability to execute, it's useless to you. So I think that you have to really know your business. You have to know your business data. You have to know your talent availability to execute. And then you have to know the political climate of your organization to adopt change and how you can enact change before you can determine which parts of a security solution are going to work in this architecture.
Okay. Mr. Betcher, I'm going to ask you a fairly pointed question. Do you and your organization know where all of your data is located?
It's a big organization, so I would say no. It's basically, a huge tree organization, right? You've got the mothership and you've got all these different, companies underneath it, right?
Right.
So I'd say probably not.
Okay.
I mean, that's a loaded question. Do you know where all of it's located? I don't know if one person or one document can, answer that.
Yeah, so we've talked about the CIS top 20 kind of things, and one of the first things is, know where your assets are, know where your hardware is, know what software you're running. I have that's not easy. How do we do that? And I did read a couple of places like in that the Reddit article there where they were talking about like micro segmentation of your zero trust implementation. Does it make sense for you to, instead of knowing where your data is would it make sense to know where the data you're going to interact with is, and then a group of people? So all of our devs have all their data in pile A here, and the CEO is going to and the C's upstairs have all their piles of information over here in this. Do you need one big data lake, or can you have a bunch of data ponds? Is that a thing to implement? Can you break it down like that, or does it have to be one big data pond lake?
No, I think that's actually one of the core tenets that make zero trust attractive, is that each individual application or each individual server, or each individual endpoint, no matter where it's located, on-prem, in the cloud, software as a service, each of those is sort of treated like an island with its own unique set of authentication needs and access control. And so the accounting department may need access to a very specific software as a service application. It can exist over there and be part of your zero trust solution because you've got, multi-factor authentication, and you've got you're handling all your authentication, but you've got the security controls just on that app for just that group of people. So I think segmenting things out actually makes sense, and it's easier to do in this kind of environment.
Okay. Well, great. I've already got LAN segmentation in my environment right now. I don't need to worry about the zero trust.
But nobody's
stuff, right?
working on the LAN anymore.
Oh.
Everybody's working from, their kitchen tables or their home offices, and hopefully soon, one day, maybe back at coffee shops and
Right.
airport
Okay.
Wi-Fi.
Okay. So you have a question in here. It says, are there different ways to implement zero trust? What are those ways? Have we already started touching on those where it's like you can put everything in one big pile, or break it up into different piles? Are there different ways of implementing zero trust to make it seamless? Like I just turn my computer on and I'm in, or I mean, how, what are the different
I
ways
guess
to
the
implement?
cloud is a pile, right?
It's somebody else's pile.
It's a pile of
Yeah.
something. oh shit. Okay.
No, I definitely think that this has to be one of those things that you start and you build in layers, right? Zero trust
Okay.
isn't a solution that you develop overnight. That I have a story that a friend of mine uses as an example. The CIO or the CISO or the CEO comes back from his latest vacation to Fiji, and while he was in the air, he was reading the little airline magazine, and it was like, oh my gosh, every company in your vertical has already moved to zero trust, and you should too, otherwise you're $1 million behind. And so they come back into the office on Monday and they go into the IT office and they're like, we have to do this and we have to do it tomorrow. And zero trust means $0, right? And that's a really big sticking point, I think, for a lot of people, is this urgency to do this perfect solution overnight. And so more than just doing it one little piece at a time, I think it's buildable. I think it's a layered solution, not necessarily a compartmentalized solution. And I think it starts with user and identity management, and asset management is the foundation, and then moves on up through your application stack if you're a development shop, or through your manufacturing and supply chain. Like it becomes iterative.
Okay. Okay. So you mentioned identity management. Would it be good for you to so you're taking stock. Let's say you are a company that already has a 2FA solution, or secondary verification, or whatever the hell you want to call it, MFA. Does it make sense to take stock of what you have already and what you can re-implement or reuse? Or maybe you can reach out to your Okta folks and go, hey, we're thinking about doing the zero trust stuff. We already have your implementation here. Will this work for what we have? Or are they going to be like, no, here's a special zero trust module that we're going to have to download, or whatever? I mean, you mentioned data, but I mean, also making sure that you have a lot of the technology already in place, right? Would make your transition a lot easier.
For sure. And I especially people who already have identity providers that they can leverage for things like single sign-on, start there. Start with, what applications have you already purchased that you haven't implemented something like a single sign-on capability for? If it's SAML capable and you haven't set that up, set that up. I know some vendors may charge like some extra, $1 or $2 per head or something for that capability. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think that's charging for more security in a product. But that's a personal gripe. But if it's out there and you haven't enabled it, or if you're still using local login for things, for applications or for appliances, change that. That's free, other than time spent. And I think if you reach out to those existing vendors and you say, hey, talk to me about how I can use your product in a zero trust philosophy, or talk to me about how your product helps me on this journey, I guarantee you somebody's got a deck. They are more than happy to sit down and talk to you about maybe features you don't know they have.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sure the
and
sales guy,
also, you probably pay for that support to help you implement that feature, right? In most cases.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they forget that a lot of times, like their account managers or their reps or whatever, they think, oh, that's only there for like renewal season or to come pitch me some new offering. But it is in their interest to help you maximize your use of the product and have it make your environment better. Like it's mutually beneficial at that point. So I advise people to reach out to the people who are the experts on the solution.
Right. So I work for a company that does not do zero trust. We still use a VPN solution, which is kind of funny. But you've got here, it said, what devices are in use. You talk about device attestation and health checks. If you're using, I'm assuming all these VPN technology companies are also creating zero trust technology solutions because they want you to stay in their ecosystem. But when you're talking about health checks, are you talking about like is there a sandbox
scan?
or something? Yeah, is a malware scan? Is it like, oh, you're not running the latest Windows updates? You haven't ran, Yum in forever? I mean, what does an attestation or health check look like?
Sure. So you'll see a lot of the VPN clients for sure. And there's other ways you can do this as well. But if you're an administrator, you can set up these profiles to say must be X current on patches. Look for certain software that has to be installed. Like hey, your AV has to be installed and running. The service can't be stopped.
Okay.
Looking for just overall sort of what's the physical and logical state of the endpoint when it's trying to connect to the network. And if it passes this list of checks, cool, that's step one. Now I've confirmed the device is by my own definition safe. Then I authenticate the person. Okay, so I know it is a person I trust coming from a device that I recognize and that I know the health of, that's in my inventory and that it matches with the person that I have it assigned to. Cool, let them through.
Okay. And so my computer completely craps the bed tonight and I need to work in the morning and I'm using my spare laptop, but I can still do my work on that second laptop? Or, I mean, what kind of special, I'm just thinking of edge cases here, but it's like, the ZeroTrust thing is like, well, if you didn't trust my original laptop, I could just pop on any laptop I wanted to and work, right? Is that how we're doing this?
No, I think, and that's where device attestation comes in, right? Like these are devices that have been authorized and known, and maybe some companies choose to go with a more flexible sort of, especially if you've got a lot of consultants and they're okay as long as it's a device that they know exists. For others, it may be very strictly controlled. Like, hey, this has to be, in our Azure AD. Like, if it's not, then it has to be a device that we issued you. So that's really going to come down to your company's business model and what makes sense for the type of business that you do and the type of data that you deal with and how sensitive it is and how mobile your employees are.
Okay. So are there different layers to that attestation? Could you just say, well, the developers are like, tier 3. So, they have to use a laptop that's issued by the organization. Whereas, IT security folks aren't all that important. I know. Send me your hate mail. I'm just kidding. But it's like, they can go work on another box. All they need is a couple of, YubiKeys or something to verify who they are. I mean, are there different layers to how much attestation you need to use for? Is it breaking down by people or importance? Is that something you should do?
Again, I think it goes back to your business model. I've worked in environments where it's like, hey, you can access email from anywhere. It doesn't have to be a company-owned device. But if you want to get to our internal Git repository, we're going to go through multiple different layers of checks. And that's really the core of what ZeroTrust means, is being able to do those different levels of checks based on who's doing it, when they're doing it, and what the content is they're trying to get to. And sort of being able to customize it and make it flexible.
Okay. When you were
talking
VDI,
about,
go ahead. What?
How does VDI fit into this? Right. The company I'm with, in order to get to the VDI, I still have to go through VPN. Can you just get rid of VPN and use, virtual machines to do your work?
Yeah, I think that's completely possible. I think for a lot of people, their infrastructure is still on-prem. And so the VDI infrastructure itself, getting to it requires the use of a VPN. But that's sort of the beauty in VDI in itself, is you can contain so much of it and then tear it down as soon as they're done. You don't have that data sitting out there on some contractor's laptop waiting to be left at the airport bar before their next flight. I think that's a huge asset, especially in a world where we do a lot more temporary engagements, or you've got a 6-week consulting gig versus being a permanent employee.
Okay. So, all right. So the name of the technology is called ZeroTrust, but in order to be able to access that information, you have to generate trust somewhere, somehow. If I have Bob, the developer's laptop, and all I need to do is, turn it on and plug it in and we're good to go. The trust has to be generated somehow, right? So how do we generate the trust if there's no trust to begin with?
And I think that's, ZeroTrust itself is kind of an odd name, but it's more never trust, always verify. It's not that there's no trust. It's that trust has to be proven. It is not something that's just assumed. Whereas back in the good old days, we assumed that as long as you were inside the network perimeter, you were one of us. So have at it. Okay. Here's all of our data. In this case, it's, hey, you want to access these company resources. Well, your laptop looks familiar. Your credentials look familiar. Cool, I'll let you in. Oh, now you want to access finance information? Let's do some extra layers of checking and make sure that while you were logged into your email, that didn't get compromised. And now this is a pivoting attempt.
Okay. Yeah, because I've heard horror stories about, companies having to create their own PKI infrastructure. And I know you specifically said we're not going to talk about PKI.
We're not going to go into the weeds on PKI.
First rule of PKI Club, don't talk ever about PKI Club. Yeah, I was around in the government when NMCI was being pushed out, which is an awful DoD program where some admiral got up in Japan one morning and wanted to be able to access his files in Norfolk is the only thing I could think of, and decided a global network would be just the thing. And ironically enough, if he'd have just waited 15 years, it would now be called like what we do every day, because it would be like the cloud. So, so what are the blockers to implementing some of this? I'm kind of going along the lines here with our lovely outline you've created here. So there are definitely some blockers. I think we've already talked about some of them, where you need to have IAM, you need to have, whatever your business model is, you need to know where your information is. But are there anything else in that respect that we need to talk about in terms of blockers?
So I think that one of the ones that gets overlooked most often is the cultural element and the overall just sort of technical debt. Every company I know, every company I've worked for is suffering from technical debt. I don't, even some of the most advanced technology companies still have debt, still have things that are in the backlog. The problem with legacy systems is that they may have been designed without this kind of architecture in mind, which makes them cost prohibitive and time consuming to replace. You're also going to get pushback, right? If you've got a legacy application that, and I pick on finance all the time. Apologies to anyone who's in finance, because
don't apologize. I've been dealing with finance right now. Don't apologize.
But if you've got someone using this mission critical finance application that is absolutely essential to the way you do your business, but it's running on outdated software and OSs that have been out of support for years, but they've built everything around it. You're doing it backwards at that point. You're building your infrastructure and your processes around that piece of technology instead of creating a baseline of hygiene and security and accepting solutions that help fit that mold. So I think that the pushback for enacting change and replacing solutions that aren't zero trust friendly or zero trust capable is probably one of the bigger hurdles. All it takes is, somebody in the CFO's office who can't get a report filed at end of quarter, and the CFO's on the phone with you saying, I want you to rip this technology out because it's impeding the business workflow. You have to be in line with the business, because the business makes money, security doesn't. And you have to make security work for them.
So in that case, you mentioned legacy systems. Everybody has a machine in their office that does something that we can't patch, or it runs on Windows XP and we can't update it because it won't work anywhere else, or, it needs this specific software build, or, it's using an ISA card, an ISA card or something. Can you effectively, bubble that system and create trust around something that it has inherent issues? Is that even a thing? Or is it like, oh no, we have to rip out all the legacy stuff, so screw you and your, old ass computer, find a replacement, or we're not going to be able to do this?
You absolutely can. But again, this becomes less of a technical conversation and more of a cultural one, because in my experience, at least, hardening those systems, trying to isolate them off as much as possible, doing that very basic OS hardening, even just of turning off unnecessary services and uninstalling unnecessary applications, somebody somewhere along the way is going to get upset with that because you've now made it slightly more difficult for them to access that resource. Maybe they used to remote into it from a building down the block, and now you've turned off that capability and they have to physically be there. That's where it becomes a cultural conversation, because their leadership, your leadership, the business as a whole has to understand the risk of not doing so. And I don't just mean signing off on we accept the risk at the annual committee meeting. I mean, actually understanding, and we saw this with Colonial recently, right? Like, you have to understand how critical systems, and we don't know all the details, obviously, of what happened there, but if a system can cause that kind of critical damage and you're not doing everything you can to air gap it, to wrap it in bubble wrap, and to set it gently in a nest where it can be undisturbed, you're opening yourself up for risk. And I think we're a little too liberal with risk acceptance in those situations.
Yeah. I've seen that where it's like, if you need to do risk audits of people who've accepted risk, where you've got a VP and he's accepted, 8,000 pieces of risk, and he's like, well, at some point you have to go, yes, even your ass is not going to be able to cash that check if it comes due. So no, you can no longer accept any more risks.
I told someone I told someone a couple of weeks ago, I was like, okay, let's go back to like old school role playing. You have a pool of mana. That is risk. You are allowed to spend those points on accepting risk. This risk is worth 5 points. This risk is worth 2 points. You as an executive cannot, if you need to accept this risk, then fine, you've got to find a way to go back and remediate that risk that you accepted 2 years ago and haven't looked at since.
Oh, that's lovely. I love that.
They should just let me run all the companies. I have the answers.
That's great. Yeah. Miss Berlin could use you.
I hate the risk acceptance stuff. I don't think anyone should be able to accept risk, because let's say, okay, they accept this risk. It's like a CFO or whatever. And then that risk manifests itself into a breach, and that breach costs the company $10 million. So do you go to the person who accepted the risk and say, okay, you owe us $10 million?
I guarantee you they'd accept a heck of a lot more risk or a heck of a lot less risk if you did it that way.
Yeah. Yep. The problem with accepting risk is you can't really put a tangible value on it and say, okay, you're going to have to pay this if this risk actually comes to fruition and causes a breach, right? So the whole idea of accepting risk is just I can't accept that. I can't accept accepting risk personally. Not a thing.
Is that just a lack of being able to communicate the impact in such a way, or because if you say the risk is $10 million and because it's never happened, so you're just shooting out all over the place here, and you don't really know if it's $10 million or not. How is there a better way? And I'm sure we're getting off into a risk quantification or qualification kind of thing, but right. Accepting those risks at a certain point, the mana pool thing makes a lot of sense. It's like, can this VP accept $100 million worth of risk? Well, yes, he can accept $10 million risk issues, or $100 million risk issue, that kind of thing. But yeah.
I think again, and I know I keep saying this, but it comes back to culture, right? Like if you've got a personality in your C-suite that views risk as monopoly money that they can write monopoly money checks against, that they don't really have to worry about until it manifests, and then of course it's like a big panic, right? But if there's not actual sincere understanding of and belief in the fact that risk exists, they see that as it's an imaginary risk fairy that doesn't actually exist in this realm until a breach happens. And then it's like, well, why didn't we fix that? Well, you accepted the risk.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, well, I'm a VP, so I have a golden parachute. I'm just gonna, get fired. Give me my give me my $20 million, and I'm gonna go work at another company. So, oh, well, so we
That's
got
right.
breached. I have a new job and $20 million. So, that kind of thing. And I still get my bonuses.
There's risk to the
because I did a
company.
good job.
There's no risk. There's no risk to them.
Right.
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 Well, and I don't think that, I think that even in the best companies with the purest of intentions, I'm sure people will make mistakes, accept risk that eventually does get breached. But I think more importantly is, are you being good stewards of risk acceptance in your company, or are you seeing risk acceptance as a way to avoid having to do security spend or hire security talent? And I think far too often it's the latter.
That was our show for this week. You can find show notes for this and all of our shows at www.breakingsecurity.com. You can also find an RSS link on the site to add to your favorite podcatcher. You can find all of us on Twitter. Miss Berlin can be found at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. And you can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We have a Slack. Come join us on our Slack. A lot of great things going on there, a lot of channels of various InfoSec-related subjects. You can get an invite on Twitter by emailing our official Twitter handle for the show at Brakesec, BRAKESEC, or you can email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for their monetary assistance by offsetting costs involved in putting out a weekly show. Zoom fees, Libsyn hosting, domain purchase, renewal, equipment upgrades, time and effort building the community we have. We appreciate all of your help and support. If you'd like a t-shirt, stickers, coffee mug, or just to show your support for the show, you can check out our TPub site, www.tpublic.com/user/BDS podcast. We thrive on your feedback. A quick 5-star comment on iTunes or Google Play Store or your favorite streaming service, Spotify, Pandora, what have you, go a long way to gaining us additional visibility. It takes no time at all, and we appreciate your help in spreading the word. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Be safe, be well, be kind to one another, take care of yourself because you're the only you have, and we'll talk to you again soon.